And you're back. Welcome back to The Yarn, Homespun Arts and Music. You've got Sandy and LJ here and Clodagh. And special guest today, we have WA's Greens MLC Brad Pettitt here with us in studio. How are you going today, Brad?
Very well, thank you. So nice to be with you both.
So nice to have you. What a treat.
Yes, it is a treat to have you in the studio.
So for those of you just joining, Brad Pettitt is here to share a little bit with us about his career in politics and passion for supporting the local arts. We'll talk a little bit about the homeless situation here in WA and how critical that's getting with the economy. And Brad, before you were elected our state's Greens MLC, you were the mayor of Fremantle for many years. In addition to this, you have sat on the board of Oxfam, AusAid. You've worked on a range of sustainable fishery and forestry projects in Cambodia, and you've served as the Dean of Schools of Sustainability at Murdoch University. And you've served on the Fremantle Council for 16 years, so you've been quite busy.
Life has been diverse and interesting, it's true. I feel I had a very, very lucky kind of range of jobs there. But yeah, certainly the new one is a different challenge altogether.
And that was just what I was going to ask you. So how has it been making that transition from the mayor of Fremantle to member of Legislative Council in the Upper House?
It has been. It's been. Look, I'm loving what I'm doing, but it was a bit of a transition, because one of the wonderful things about the mayor role, which I did for over 11 years, it is very collaborative in some ways, and you're kind of working with your community, trying to make things happen, trying to kind of actually get on and see how you can make your community better, and you kind of get to see things happen. And the state Parliament's a bit different. So being on the crossbench, which I am, and not in government, the way state politics is set up is much less collaborative. It's much more about party politics, and I think I found that a little bit frustrating at the start, because I always was used to saying to people, "Oh, let's work together and what can we get done?" And I realised pretty quickly that wasn't the way that state politics worked. But there are other ways I can have influence, and I've just been around finding that as well. And I've actually now, it's been a year and a bit now, and doing some really interesting things. And we'll talk about one of those in a moment, around the inquiry that I've helped initiate into homelessness in WA, and that's the kind of things I think we can do when you're not in government, but in the Parliament, is actually raise the profile of key issues and important things that are happening in our community.
100%. And we were talking just a little bit on the break about how in the current economic crisis, I guess since COVID times, we've seen interest rates go up. We've seen more people than ever jobless, homeless. It's a sort of a global trend, and certainly here at home as well too. So I know that's a big initiative for the Greens, and for you it's a big issue for you as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in WA we found it really tough. I think anyone who's in the rental market would know that if you're applying for a rental now, it's you and several dozen other people all going for the same house. The prices are going up, and it's hard. I mean, and with cost of living's going up as well. And what we've seen is more and more people being pushed into homelessness, sleeping in their cars, many sleeping rough or couch surfing. I mean, we're seeing this across the state, unfortunately, and it's stark, in fact, where we're at. And one of the challenges that I'm trying to do now through this inquiry that we're doing, in fact we've got hearings into it tomorrow, is to work out how we can fix this quickly and actually get more housing, and get especially for housing on people who are vulnerable and low incomes. And there are many good reasons to do this, but one that's certainly front of mind is especially for women who are many escaping domestic violence, there is nowhere for them to go, and those kinds of things. And these are things we need to do in our community.
Yeah, I've been homeless for 3 years. I couch surfed, occasionally lived on the streets, slept rough, as they call it, when I couldn't find someone to look after my previous service dog, tests. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's a horrible feeling of not having anywhere to call home and not knowing where you're going to be sleeping the next night, and it feels so unsafe too.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed when I was homeless was that as a woman, in Western Australia, there's no homeless shelters. There's only if you're escaping domestic violence, and then they're only for 3 weeks. So what do you plan to do about that?
It's a really good point you make, and there's actually the things that need to happen, and I think we'll come through the inquiry. As you said, there is, especially for women, very few places to go. I know there is one. It's kind of a shelter in Perth, but there's not even a bed. There's just beanbags, and you're just like, so and you can't come in to 7 o'clock, and you've got to be out by 7 o'clock. And this is hardly. I mean, so one of the things that really needs to happen is actually to find housing for people. So the approach that I think is best practice, and look, it is one that I think we're seeing the government trying to embrace is what's called housing first. So getting people into housing, wrapping services around them, what they need, because it's only when you feel safe, as you said, Sandy, that you can actually get the rest of your life start to pull things back together.
I still do have mental health issues, but back then it was a lot more profound. The fear of being homelessness made my mental health escalate. And so, I mean, I'm fortunate enough now to live in Homes West housing, or the former Homes West as it was called, and I haven't been to hospital since. And I used to be in hospital, a frequent flyer visitor for my mental health, and this was 8 years ago. And I haven't needed to go to the hospital for mental health. I still have my mental health looked after, but I haven't had that crisis situation since feeling safe in my own home.
Can I say what you said there is so important, and I wish we need to make sure we record this and get this every decision maker out there, because what that shows, and you're a really good example of that, is actually investing in housing, investing in these things actually saves money, because ultimately people would keep presenting to hospital, that costs the state tens of thousands of dollars, and it's a false economy by not actually investing in the housing and the services that we need.
Yes.
I know, Brad, that you have been very passionate about using existing structures. And so what is the barrier sort of between the existing houses that we have sort of in the community and putting people in those? So we have structures that are not being renovated, that are boarded up. And what are some of the barriers that we face with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And there's certainly been some press this week, which I'm glad there was, which was highlighted in the middle of a housing crisis. The Department of Housing keeps demolishing houses. Houses that, they weren't perfect, but they were fine. Or boarding them up. And this has to stop. I mean, it is just crazy that you would actually, in the middle of one of the worst housing crises this state has faced, we're actually reducing housing. In the first term of the government, they actually knocked over more than 1,000 more houses than they built. In the social housing space. And we wonder why we have a housing crisis. That's what happens when you keep knocking them over. So one of the things that we're saying is get on, build houses, but also build houses that are the right kinds of houses for people in their lives. Build houses where people can create community, kind of get together. Build houses, like one of the project that I really love that we were doing when I was mayor at the city of Fremantle, and has just been built now in North Fremantle, actually near the train station, is housing for women at risk of homelessness over 55, and it's just going to be a series of about 20 little houses. I think they're only about 30 square metres each, but they're beautifully designed. Got some nice shared spaces, community gardens next to North Fremantle train station. So for me, it's around that smart new thinking around how we do this. Yeah,
and where you put the housing is just as important as actually putting the housing in. Being close to public transport and community, such as we have in Fremantle.
Absolutely.
With so much on your plate, how much of the budget will be spent, towards local arts and community radio?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. And I think in this last state budget, look, there was some good elements, I think, in the arts and community radio space, but not enough. I mean, and what I was hoping would happen coming out of COVID is realising how important this thing is. the arts suffered so badly during COVID. I mean, many artists couldn't do what they do, which is getting in front of people, and it was. I think we've, as a result of that, it needs to be a really strong investment as we come out to actually get to reinvigorate the arts, reinvigorate art spaces, and that's something that we're really pushing the government to do. And I come here and hear that there is no state funding for IPL Radio, which kind of blows my mind. I'm like, really? This is such a great initiative. Came out of COVID. So one of the things I've committed to doing on the back of this is actually going and actually seeking where we can get some money and putting pressure on the government to actually do this. This is the kind of things that we should be funding. This is a government with a $5.7 billion surplus. It's not like there's a lack of money. So let's actually get on and do that.
So IPL's been going for about 2 years. We have 10,000 listeners a week and about 60 active volunteers, about 200 volunteers, did I say? Yeah, about 200 altogether. We do mental health training, but we rely on Tris and his dad to pay the rent and the broadcasting licence and the wages. Do you know of any funding available? Any funding sources?
So obviously, I mean, I think we've got to do better than just relying on Lotteries West and the kind of things that I know that the handballs have gone to so far. So I actually think this is the kind of thing that should be core government funding and ongoing. It should be it's an investment. And it's a low-cost investment.
It is for what it provides.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm really happy to have a conversation with with Amber Jade Sanderson, who's the minister responsible for this space, both health and mental health, and say actually, this is again a bit like housing and homelessness. This is a kind of right investment up front that actually saves the state money because actually helping people on that journey, giving the supports they need. It's smart. And it doesn't require huge amounts of money to keep it going. And the worst thing would be to see something like this that's built itself up over the last 2 years. To see that close would be absolutely devastating.
That would be such a shame. Yeah.
Well, Friends of the Arts Inclusive Resource is able to get behind IPL because IPL is a friend of the arts, and it is provided in a space which is inclusive and accessible. This is being the old Centrelink building, I think.
Oh, is it?
Is accessible for wheelchairs and the like. So it's very inclusive space as well, and I think that's very important. It's not a lot of spaces out there that offer the opportunity for people with mental health and other disabilities to broadcast and share our thoughts around the things we're passionate about.
Yeah.
It might be time to go to a quick song.
Let's go to a song. What we have here, Spaces by Young Robin. And then when we come back, we'll hear more from Brad Pettitt and his Triple Bottom Line initiative, how the arts can support that initiative. And we're back on the yarn, homespun arts and music. We are just having a yarn here. I've got Sandy, I'm LJ, we have Clodagh, and special guest Brad Pettitt is here with us. So for those of us who are just joining us, Brad Pettitt is obviously the Greens MLC of WA. We've been talking a little bit about the homeless issue and how that has skyrocketed everywhere and also in WA since the housing crisis began. And I wanted to sort of ask you a little bit about what you refer to as your Triple Bottom Line initiative with social, economic, and environmental factors and how all of those have sort of an optimal balance. So what initiatives are you currently working on that involve those?
Yeah, so that's at the heart of what we're passionate about. And probably one good example of that is a project we're doing, which is we're calling at the moment Net Zero Perth. It might change name. And the idea being, how do we reimagine this city, I mean, the Greater Perth from Yanchep to Mandurah, as a city without carbon emissions, a city that actually is meeting the climate challenge in front of us. I think there is a really strong evidence that we need to get our emissions down quickly, and the cities are the place to do it. I mean, one of my favourite stats about cities is while cities only make up about 2% of the land mass, about half of the people globally live in cities.
Mm-hmm.
They're also responsible for about 70% of carbon emissions. So if we get our cities right, we actually solve a big chunk of the climate crisis. And we can do it and save. And this is where the triple bottom line comes in. We can do it in a way that not only helps the environment, but we can do it in a way that actually makes for a better, more connected, more livable society, but also one that actually saves people money. I mean, and is economically better, and that's what it's got to look like. So that's my real passion around is how do we start to map that out. So we're doing this quite fun collaborative project involving all the universities and groups from the RAC to the Property Council to a whole range of them, a whole bunch of peak bodies, all looking at how do we reimagine that, and then as a way to kind of inspire that. But this is where the arts are really important and come in, because we actually do have the technical solutions to do this, but the fact we're not doing it is actually a bit of a failure of imagination. And and in many ways, this is where we've actually been talking about this. How do we actually use the arts to try to inspire people to think about what Perth could look like?
That's the question.
Yeah.
Very good question. And how can IPL support that vision as well too, right? We have this unique voice, we have this unique opportunity to sort of bring some of those ideas out and also get ideas to come in. So I feel like this is part of a larger dialogue that we're going to be having on the show.
Yeah, look, I would love that, and I'd be very happy to come back and talk about it some more, because I just feel like there's such an opportunity there, and the more people we get talking about these issues and kind of reimagining and sharing ideas and stories, I think the more it can happen. And I guess that for me is one of my fun challenges for the year ahead.
I love that. I love this idea of reimagining, and that's what we do as artists, right? Like we imagine a world that that is possible and sort of plug into that dimension of life and bring that to the public. So that is fantastic. Do you have anything else, Sandy, for Brad?
I was going to ask about Aoife. How's she doing? She's just turned 5 this week, I believe.
She did. I have a 5-year-old girl who we just had her 5th birthday party on Friday, which is a lot of fun. She's good, but it was but it's funny doing birthday parties now, the way that they've changed since we were young. And there was a big debate about pass the parcel. Do you have a prize in every layer or just one at the end?
Just the one prize.
This must be an Aussie thing.
Do you know pass the parcel?
No.
Oh, it's where you get a prize and you wrap it in newspaper or wrapping paper and you pass along while the music's playing, and then when the music stops, you have got to take off a layer.
Aww,
and eventually somebody gets a prize. But,
but
it depends on their age. When they're about 4 or 5, you need to make sure everyone gets a prize every turn. As they get older, you can have just the one prize.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I was pushing for the what the joke was, the 1980s version, which was just the one prize, but now everybody wins. These are
millennials we're dealing with.
That's right. So we did that. We did tug of war. We did musical statues and pin the tail on the donkey. It was a very fun 5-year-old birthday.
Oh, that sounds great.
So
did you have
cute.
fairy bread? And
yeah, that's the other thing that changed. Probably not as much sugar as it used to be.
It was all carrot sticks.
There's lots of
and
fruit.
Hummus.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brad
Thank you,
Pettitt. Do you have any final words for our
look,
our
can I
listeners
just
today?
say, so nice to be down here and keep up the great work that you're doing, all of you. It's really inspiring to see. Excuse the pun. Look, I'd love to come back, and in the meantime, I'll see if we can make sure we push
some funding for us.
Exactly right. That's the plan.
That would be great.
Amazing. And thank you for all that you do too, Brad. And we look forward to catching up soon in the future.
I did want to just segue into Wild and Free.
Oh, yeah.
Brad's agreed. Brad was actually our MC for Kindness Emerging back in 2020.
Oh, cool.
And he's kindly agreed to come on board for Add a Touch of Class to Wild and Free 2022 by being our MC and our auctioneer. Just wanted to advise everybody that the tickets are on sale now for Wild and Free. You just go to www.fairwa.com.au and the artist call out is closed tomorrow. So if you haven't got your artwork in yet, please do so to fair.sandy with a double I, a Sandy double I, at outlook.com. So that was what I wanted to say about that.
Awesome. That event is not to be missed, whether you're an artist bringing art or just want to come and support the local inclusive community. Please come out. And without further ado, I'm going to
finish off with a song.
Yeah, let's play Buoyancy by Body Type.
Sounds good.